on failings as we go into what will be the second wave of this crisis. I'd also say I don't think Kate Green, I don't think the shadow education team have done enough to support students. I think we should have seen this coming. We saw similar things happening in New York City when the students went back and they were in a closed environment, and terrible problems happened. And now we're seeing the equivalent. Ellie obviously said in Liverpool. You've seen it here in University of East Anglia, where I read yesterday that the freshers are paying £250 for 2 weeks of food. I don't really understand why that seems to be happening. And I know you have a good MP in Clive Lewis, but to be quite honest, there's been no understanding. I don't know what conversations you've had with your kind of vice chancellor team, but it seems to be not good enough. And I'd like to see Kate Green and the shadow education team do a little bit more in terms of rebutting and connecting with students. I don't think, I was on the Clarke here event last week, and it was nice, but there was no follow-up. So I would have loved to have seen a follow-up of what we're going to do, having listened to all these students. So I don't know if you can give it a grade, but maybe B-.
Thanks for that, Kathleen. And then Jess, do you want to go?
Thank you. Well, I'll start by just saying, Boris Johnson has obviously been a complete joke, and we all want to see Labour elected to make sure that the chaos of this Tory government comes to an end. But I have to be honest, and I'm pretty critical of how the current leadership have managed this situation, which is really kind of letting people down from what I can see. From my perspective, we shifted from a Labour leadership that stood quite proudly on its record of popular socialist policies and that constantly provided this alternative to a failing system that we have all known most of our lives, and can obviously see right now. And right now, in the middle of a crisis, an economic pending crisis, and a health crisis, is the time that people start looking at a system and saying, this isn't working, and they start looking for alternatives. And I think it's really essential that we should be providing that, but instead we seem to be running away from criticising the Tories. So, what that looks like is that we failed to oppose a number of disastrous policies. So, when we failed to address the fact that teachers hadn't been properly prepared to go back to schools, we made statements like students have to go back, no ifs or buts. We didn't listen to the unions on what they were saying the conditions that were needed to be met to do this safely for students and for staff. And we have a duty to ensure that we step in and represent those people, because we are the party of the workers, we're the party of the key workers, we're the party of young people, we're the party of disabled people. And so if we're failing to stand up to them when the Tories are treating them like cannon fodder, then we're not doing our job as an opposition. So I think it's clear, to me and probably to many of you, that Keir's strategy is very different to what we're used to. And it is currently, I think, to avoid conflict. But in my view, that's okay, as long as it doesn't fail the people that we need to be standing by and defending, which I think that we are currently on the cusp of doing. So opposition, from my perspective, does work when you're firm. So from the early weeks of COVID, you probably remember, we were very outspoken on things like the need to introduce payments for people who were not going to be in work. And from public pressure and Labour opposition pressure, we saw the introduction of things like the furlough scheme, which meant that millions of people weren't then suddenly sacked. So it does work when we put forward our alternatives and when we campaign for it, but we have to be willing to take that leap, and we have to be willing to speak out when we see inequality, injustices, and make sure we don't fail the people that need Labour as an opposition and eventually Labour in government.
Thanks for that, Jess. So we saw three kind of sort of spectrum of sort of different levels of critique towards the current leadership. So following on from that, with regards to how much you sort of disagree and would critique Keir and those around him, how would you plan to hold him to account as the chair of Young Labour? And I keep going to say the chair of UEA Labour, so sorry if that accidentally slips out at some point. So can we start with, I think, should we just start with Jess for this one? And then sort of go backwards? So actually, no, start with Jess and then maybe Ellie, then Kathleen, sorry.
Thanks, Kate. You can say chair of UEA if you like. Come for your role.
Yeah, taking my baby from me.
So how do I plan to hold Keir Starmer to account? Well, There's a few things that I think could be done that currently aren't done, but like many things, Young Labour has a really long way to go to having its kind of full potential, its full power and influence realised. So at the minute, the Young Labour National Committee rarely meets. I think the last time a meeting was organised was in July, and I think before that, probably April. So there are really long periods when the Young Labour Committee goes without meeting. But when we have met, we have invited people like Cat Smith, we invited to one of our last meetings. She was very willing to come along and to listen to our concerns. And so something that I think should happen, if I'm elected chair, and I will be ensuring that this does happen, is to hold monthly meetings as minimum as a committee, and make sure that we regularly reach out to Keir Starmer himself, but also members of the front bench, to ensure that young members' voices are being heard, particularly around policy that predominantly impacts young members. So if we're looking at things like education, rent, low pay, all of these issues, young members should be being consulted on, and at the very least their elected representatives should be involved in developing those policies and making sure that they have their say, and that we form policy around the people that it most impact. There is also time when external pressure does have to be used. So there have been times recently that I felt that the leadership haven't been listening to people who have been contacting them privately. So I think we have to be selective about when we do this, and we always have to make sure that it's constructive and that we are seeking to create some change as a result of this. So this is something that I think we have to be selective around, but I am prepared to do. And so one of the examples of doing this is when the leadership were failing to comment on the Tories' attack on trans rights and failing to reform the GRA. We had silence from the Labour leadership for months. So I co-wrote an open letter with fellow LGBT members to call on the leadership to take action, to stand by trans people, and that was signed by over 1,000 Labour members within the first 24 hours, and we did since get a response from the leadership and Marsha on that issue. So it does work. We just have to be quite creative. We have to put the effort in, but also we need to make sure we're part of the dialogue and always making sure that we champion the voice of young members.
Sorry, thank you. So I think it's really, really important that that Young Labour has a voice with the leadership. We are, at the heart and soul of our party, and we should absolutely be, at the forefront of our party. We should be the driving force in our party. There are currently around 100,000 members of Young Labour, and we need that support, and we need to show that support. That we need to show our presence in the Labour Party itself. We need to show it with the leadership. So I pledge, if I am elected chair, I will meet with the leadership at least once a month to discuss how young people in the Labour Party can influence policy. I'll also pledge to have online digital learning and online digital hubs where we speak to ministers and members of our party, ministers of our party, our shadow cabinet and our MPs to discuss policy, to discuss how we grasp policy and discuss really the ins and outs of policy. It's so important that we understand policy, and young people are given the tools to understand policy. Young people will be at the heart of revolutionising the way we campaign in the future. And we can't just have young people sort of on their phones and on their computers the same way as young people have been used in the past in the Labour Party, of just, as cannon fodder on doorsteps. We have to start utilising the skills that we learned, we were born with, the skills that, we've grown up with into a digital revolution. I think that's really important, and we ensure that the leadership knows that. We ensure that we have to be at the heart, especially of this sort of new digital age, especially with Zoom. And yeah, we really have a voice, and I will absolutely pledge where I can to ensure that we have a voice wherever possible.
Fab. Okay. So I'll just speak.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to jump in? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, the first thing I kind of want to say is that I actually don't think that there's anybody in the UK that needs Labour to be in opposition, but I do think that there are a lot of key workers and a lot of people on the breadline and a lot of young people and students that actually need Labour to be in government. And whether that's ward by ward, community or community by community, I'm not too sure opposition for opposition's sake is can be that effective unless it's used in precise ways and it's used in very precise terms. I just think that, you know, every single vote for the next 4 years, because we lost so badly, we will probably lose. I think it's going to be, you know, we're in a case now where I think we've lost about 15 years worth of votes because we've consistently lost elections. But anyway, that's a point for another time. So I actually agree with a lot of what Ellie and Jess have said. So there's kind of two sides to this. There's what are Young Labour, or what are they doing on the ground that helps, and what are they doing on the ground to like support students. So whether that's, I was reading today, I think it's Lancaster Uni, the Labour Society there is providing support, one-on-one support for students, whether that's, I've seen university Labour clubs providing like Zoom accounts and for people to meet and be socially together, or whether that's, you know, because I'm a glutton for punishment, I'm the Open Labour Youth Officer, and last week we wrote a letter to every single Vice Chancellor, and we started a campaign called End the Crisis on our campuses. And we were the first, from what I know, we were the first kind of youngish group to do that. And the point of that was to meet Kate Green, which we hopefully will be doing soon, and to meet with several other people and to say, okay, this isn't good enough and we've got to start making some changes now. I was lucky enough to lead that campaign. It's gone really well. I can't believe the amount of signatures that we've got. It clearly shows that we've touched on a nerve that the Labour Party isn't doing enough. I'd also say, I think, you know, Ellie and Jess are right. We do need to speak to the leadership. I know that they're in a situation now where they're actually just, instead of providing policy, they're just commentating on the current, the government's agenda. And I think we've got to be really careful to not fall into their narrative and to produce a narrative that's like, under a Labour government, this will be better because X, Y, and Z. So I think we've got to, you know, do it on the ground, make sure that people are connected in the best way that we can, and provide that doorstep support. And then we've got to take it up to KIR, we've got to take it up to our NEC, we've got to take it up to our student reps, anyone that we can do. I think that this is a time where factional politics should be put aside and people have got to come together to help out these students. I'd also love to see some kind of consistent, like, it's great to talk about the meetings that Young Labour have had, but I would really love to see a lot more in terms of the manifesto, or like what our national policy forum will be coming up with in the future. An understanding of this education system has been broken for like 20, 30 years now. And we, you know, if Labour in government, we would have fixed it, but we're not in government. So here's what we're going to ask the government to do instead, or here's what we're saying. I don't know. I don't really understand, like, KIR hasn't been in government, hasn't been in office for so long. So I don't quite know how he makes policy. I don't quite know if it's, you know, like Jeremy Corbyn, where it's like all done amongst a couple of people, or it's all done amongst the NEC, or if it's a little bit more like the Brown style of national policy forums. But I'll be interested to see what happens there. And I think you just have to be, as understanding as you can be in situations like this. Like, you know, everyone, I'm sure on the Zoom call has not had a great year. Everyone on the Zoom call has experienced loss. Everyone on the Zoom call has had, you know, sickness, unhealth, tough emotional or mental health stress. And I think just being there and listening is actually really important. And I think the government, you know, the government never cared about students, but now we know that they definitely don't care about students. The proof is in the pudding, as it said.
Okay, so thanks for that. So sorry if you hear any rustling in the background, by the way. My dog is currently trampling through a lot of plastic bags. So sorry for the disruption. But the next question, leading on quite nicely from that, is how would you sum up your vision for the student Labour movement? So if we start with Ellie, and then go Cathleen, and then go to Jess last this time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think being the only student on this call, being the only student among the running for chair, I really understand. And I really, you know, I'm at the heart of what it's like to be a student. I'm just begun my third year, and it's really difficult at the moment. As I say, you know, in Liverpool, they've literally just announced in the last few minutes that we're going to online learning. We're seeing places across the country, universities and colleges alike, going to online learning, and we really have to ensure that students are protected where possible. Personally, I'd like to see first and foremost that for university students, they're given not only a cap on their rent, that there is a universal cap, but also if they choose to go home because they feel unsafe because of COVID, they can without having to pay rent, as we've seen in Scotland with the SNP and what they've done. We need that policy in England and Wales. as well as Northern Ireland. You know, I think there's so much potential with students, and as Kathleen said, you know, our education system is broken. It hasn't been broken for 30 years. It's been broken for far, far longer than that, and we really need to harness that. We really need to go into government, and we need to ensure that students and people, as well as people who are in further education, higher education, they are put at the absolute forefront. We've been given such a rotten deal, especially since the Tories took charge in 2010. We've seen tuition fees hike, we've seen students getting poorer, and we've seen our budgets being slowly but surely made down to zero, and that's just not good enough. So we need to sort out our financial situation. We need to sort out that they're protected. We need to ensure especially that rents aren't hiked. In Liverpool, it has the highest rent outside of London of any university. Currently, the average student in Liverpool pays £160 a week for their rent, and that's just not good enough. It's far, far too high, and like I say, that has to be our priority in government. We need to ensure that there's a universal cap on rent.
Great. Do you want to go to Kathleen now?
Sure. Could you quickly repeat the question?
Oh, no problem at all. What is roughly your sort of broad vision for the student Labour movement? Obviously, you're standing for young Labour, but you know, given that there's currently like an absence of Labour students.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was just checking. That's the question about. Okay. Yeah. So I think once again, this is a two-part answer. So the first part would be the fact that students are getting a bad deal and have probably always got a bad deal, but we're just seeing it maybe a little bit now more, that everyone's got a mobile phone and that the media is actually paying attention to students. I completely understand the refund the rent campaigns. That I actually believe that education at all points should be free at the point of use, and people should be able to, you know, have an education and go and do a job. But if they want to retrain or they want to reskill, that should be free as well. I'm a little bit like, I think that was already offered in previous Labour manifestos, but I'd like to see that continued in the future. I don't think that there shouldn't be this concept that if you're maybe a poorer student that you can't go to university, or that you're going to be saddled with debt, or you can't go into higher education. I actually had to take a break from, just on Ellie's point, I had to take a break from my education because I couldn't afford it, to be quite honest. And my mental health was not in a state where I could balance 3 jobs and a degree. And I got a job doing something else that I love. So what was the point of me being there anyway? So first of all, obviously, tuition fees, that's got to go. It's obviously seen in European countries and other places around the world that actually that tuition fees make absolutely no sense. It provides students with a huge amount of mental health issues. It provides them with a huge amount of financial debt. It doesn't set them up well for life. And people should be able to study what they want and not be pushed into studying things because it might get them a better graduate job, or it may or may not. They should be equipped with the skills that they need in the future and not the skills that they necessarily need now, which means that universities have to actually look at what their graduates might have to go into, like a world that they're going into, and whether that's like teaching them about mortgages, teaching them about how to handle debt. I don't think higher education, I don't think they're doing that. So that's kind of one, which is like refund the rent, tuition fees, free tuition fees, an ability that it doesn't matter who you are, you should be able to have the right to retrain or to go to university and to study something you're interested in. I'd also say off that, like, a lot of my friends study the arts and are consistently told that their degrees are invalid. Literally don't understand why people seem to think that's okay when we spent the past 6 months in lockdown watching Netflix, but there we go. My second point is, what can we do about Labour students and what can we do about young Labour as it is? So Labour students had many failings. I probably am not the person most qualified to go into every single failing that Labour students had. I'm sure probably somebody has a blog about it that you can go and read independently, but there's a very clear understanding that whatever happens next, and I believe the NEC will be discussing it at the next meeting, there has to be a body where all students are taken into account, where all students are represented, where it's a welcoming environment, free from kind of factional tittle-tattle or like people getting one up on each other. And it's people that are there to represent students, whether that's students who are sitting in halls, whether that's mature students, whether that's underrepresented students, whether that's students from the best university in the UK or the worst university in the UK. They've got to be all in there together and being represented well. I'd love to see that happen. I think whoever becomes chair of the 3 of us will have a big job in making sure that that's assembled properly and making sure that we kind of give students the tools that they need to be successful, whether that's in their kind of local Labour group, whether that's on their doorsteps, whether that's providing them with the kind of skills and development pathways that they might need to go into the labour movement when they graduate. Maybe people, you know, have an experience at university and would like to create policy off the back of that. Maybe they have kind of mental health issues, or they have financial issues, and they'd love to see a Labour Party policy that actually could help them. I'd love to be able to, if I was elected chair, I'd love to be able to take kind of harness that energy that students have and put it into a structure where the students then go on to be successful in whatever it is they choose to do. So I kind of hope that's answered your question.
Absolutely, thanks. And then Jess.
Thank you. So what's my vision for the student labour movement? I'm just going to start with a slight correction to Ellie, because I am a student. I'm a distance learner, so I do evenings studying around my job. So I've actually got my final exam in like a few days, and I can't honestly tell you how excited I am to have my evenings back. So what my vision is, I guess, is based around like what a number of you have previously told me. I've met with quite a few of you and Kate as well to talk about this, and a number of other student organisations around the UK too. So the previous situation of Labour students was a situation where we had quite a cliquey situation where active Labour student groups were shut out of democratic processes. They weren't able to participate in elections. I'm not sure if, I think UEA wasn't allowed to participate in the last Labour student elections. I think that's right. I can see.
I think the last set, we automatically disaffiliated because we didn't re-affiliate.
Okay,
yeah.
You didn't really affiliate, and the time before that, I'm pretty sure UEA were barred from participating. So it wasn't democratic.
It doesn't surprise me.
It didn't empower you to elect your representatives. It was a complete, like, appalling process, and I'm really glad to see the back of it, to be honest. You deserve so much better, and it's something that us on the Young Labour National Committee have fought for a really long time, and we're really pleased to see finally you have OMOV elected 3 student representatives on Young Labour's National Committee, which previously wasn't the case. So you now have that, and make sure that your voices are heard to those elected representatives. You can find out all about the people standing for those positions, I'm sure, online, on Twitter, they're very active. So do keep an eye out for those and make sure you participate in those elections, because it's the first time we've had it, and we're really, really pleased to have that. So your reps on the Young Labour National Committee isn't just what we should be looking to build. We need to build a Labour students organisation which is itself democratic, that is autonomous, and that serves to support students to take action in their communities, which, you know, previously it didn't do. So I would like to see Labour student groups come together to build up a national body that they would like to see, that reflects the activity that they want to happen and the democratic processes that they need to see. Obviously, I think that we at bare minimum need to ensure that across the board it's OMOV, to ensure we never return to the days of people being shut out of democratic participation. And so I pledge to do everything in my power to support you to build that, and make sure that, you know, we never return to the days of where we don't put students first and listen to people when they say, you know, we want the power to do this, we want to be trusted to elect our representatives. Politically speaking, I think we need to make sure that student groups have the resources to create community movements for change. So I know in Norwich, some of you have been involved in the Norfolk Against Holiday Hunger campaigns. I've seen and been to UCU strikes. And I know a number of you have been involved in the campaign to support, I think it was cleaners who were being made to pay for parking. So I've seen a great deal of activity in your UEA Labour Society, but that has been in spite of the resources that you haven't been given. So we really need to see Labour students being given resources, support, across the board, to make sure that you can go out into your communities and campaign for the change you want to see and bring that energy into every single community. So I pledged to develop a political education programme, which I also plan to share and collaborate with students to develop. And I also see the future student labour movements leading the way in the fight back against this government. So, you know, organising rent strikes and re-galvanising the campaign against tuition fees. And this is something that you guys are going to be at the forefront of over the next few years.
Thanks for that, Jess. So the next question, we're starting getting onto the questions now that are a bit more external, less about internal party things, more about policy, and it kind of links on quite nicely to the question about student labour movements, and it's sort of more broad. How do we fix higher education, both for students and for staff, for those involved in the sector? So I think we said, so I've made sure I spread everything out equally so that everyone gets the same number of times answering the question first, second and third, because I'm that much of a nerd. So this one was for Kathleen, then Ellie, then Jess.
Okay, so I think it's quite a big question, which is what should kind of Labour's education policy be, or what should our higher education policy be? And I will try in 1.5 minutes to answer that. It's very, very broad, and I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to give you my 2 cents on the matter because you've asked for it. So I think we have to operate on the understanding that students who go and study are doing it for the benefit of society and the benefit of our lives and the benefit of everyone. And whether that's if you're going to be an engineer or an artist and everything in between. And this idea that some degrees are worth more than others, I think is like completely ludicrous and ridiculous. I think this idea that like you have to pay for education, I think on the whole is a disaster. I don't really understand, because, you will see here, you're all studying, but then when we graduate, or when you graduate, you will spend the rest of your life paying taxes and giving back to society and giving back to the world and building a better world in which we are all going to live together. So I don't really understand why it should cost £9,250 per year plus everything else. I also thought, which was quite interesting, a lot of universities, I don't know if UEA has it, but this understanding that you have to pay rent, you have to pay for your tuition fees, and then you also have to pay for your books and everything else that you might need. It's like, I don't really understand why that's like in any way acceptable. I think there are tons of other models of like universities around the world. Germany is kind of an example for me, where education's free, people have a great time, there's less of a mental health crisis, you can study abroad, you can study if you want to at the university, you can do distance learning, there's a variety of degrees, you don't have to just pick one thing that you study for 3 years, you can mix and match your modules, and you can take a year off and go to Erasmus and go and see another culture and learn about that if you want to. And they seem to have a better education system on the whole than we do. So I'm kind of a little bit at a loss as to that. That's kind of higher education, which I think should be free, and you should be able to go back and retrain at any point in your lives. I think it's ridiculous to say that, we're all going to graduate with one thing, and then for the rest, for the next 60 years, we're all going to work in that one industry. I think it's ludicrous. You should be able to go back and change and rechange. And if the society changes or if something comes in, you should be able to, go and grow and learn new things. I also think education on the whole is, I don't know if the British education system is good enough, like by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think that people are actually given an opportunity to learn about things that they want. Like, I'm sure you all make the joke that, you're in debt, you don't understand, you don't understand how a mortgage works, you don't understand how compound debt works, you don't understand how to do a job interview, you don't understand how to write a CV, but thank God you learnt, a haiku, for example. Like, what I don't understand, like, it's not based on what our graduates will need or our students will need in the future. It's not based on giving them the skills that they need for life. It's based on like this ancient national curriculum which has been passed down from like year to year, although there's really no reflection of what our kind of future leaders will lead. Like, I was looking on University of East Anglia earlier on, and there have been several prominent politicians that have come from this university, which is like fantastic to see. So everyone in this group is going to be the next kind of leader, are going to be the next leaders, are going to be the next MPs, but you're not given the, like, because of your education, because of what, you're being taught, you're not given the tools to actually do the job properly. Like, for me, it's just, this whole thing is ridiculous. So what really can Labour do? I think it's challenging the government on several things. And there are really easy things that we should challenge the government on. For example, like, education is not worth, your education is not £9,200 a year. It wasn't 5 years ago, and it certainly isn't this year, because it's all going to be online, majority of people. The government had a chance to kind of change that a while ago, and they chose not to. They saw what was going on in America and what other countries had done, and they chose not to. They chose to ignore it, basically. So I think, what can the Labour movement do, and what can kind of the people here do? Challenge the government whenever you can, and then on top of that, just to kind of finish, is to say, provide a better solution. Like, actually sit down and say, well, if I was a student, what would I want to learn? Or what do I think the challenges will be in the next 50 to 100 years? Like, a lot of things that we are taught are just not being used. And whether that's you were taught at 11 or 12, or you're being taught that now as a graduate or a post, or, postgraduate, And it's making sure that you can learn for free the things that you want to, on the understanding that when you graduate, you will spend the next 60 years of your life giving back to society with the knowledge that you're equipped to learn. And just obviously in terms of like the Labour Party, I think we should keep with a lot of things that the Corbyn era said in terms of education. I think there was really strong on education, actually. And I'd also say, so the National Policy Forum is how Labour will decide its policy in the next 3 or 4 years, from what I understand. And it's just making sure that students get a chance to feed into that as much as possible. And that's led by young people and not led by a couple of people sitting in Westminster.
Thanks for that. And so, Joe, sorry, just to add in, we also had a Doctor Who. We had Matt Smith come to UEA. So, you know,
well, that's very impressive. That's a bit of
yeah. It's the most important thing.
I quite like how you've had Caroline Flint and Douglas Carswell. It's like you can really, like Ian Dale and Douglas Carswell, like Caroline Flint and Rachel Maskell is like you really can learn it. Like I'm actually fascinated to see like what the people in this group are going to be doing in 20 years time and what their politics are going to be.
Oh, we're all Douglas Carswell fans here.
Obviously.
We're all quasi bash, it's fine. And Jess.
Sorry, I was too busy laughing then to unmute. How do we solve higher education? Cool. I think this is quite simple. I mean, it shouldn't be, because it's quite a complex like structure, but we obviously just need to address firstly like the financialization model being implemented in higher education that we've seen definitely in the Tory era, but probably before that too, because this model like prioritizes profit, doesn't it? It won't work while we're looking at things like education, because our priority needs to be that we are educating people for, you know, whatever it might be that they want to do, and it can't be that we're always looking for outcomes for profits for shareholders or people in extremely senior positions within universities who are on huge salaries, and increasingly so, while students get a worse and worse deal. So I think that the failure of students like during this pandemic is quite telling of like what we've seen in how students are treated and viewed by the system over the past, especially 10 years, like I said. So the forcing students to go back into their accommodation so that universities can continue to make money through rent, while students don't get access to the quality education that they've been promised. They're in some places in complete lockdown and aren't able to access food, being forced to pay for food packages if they do need them delivered if they're isolating, and basically just treated as a bank by the very people who are meant to be nurturing, supporting and providing this education. But this isn't something that's new from this crisis. So if we look at, for example, the mental health support provided to students over the past few years has been increasingly failing. A system that used to be fairly positive for students has become increasing pressure to get students back into the classroom, get students back meeting deadlines, and not prioritising health and the holistic well-being of students instead of, and then now focusing on what grades can we get them to achieve, and if we can't get them to achieve the grades we want, then putting more pressure on them and eventually forcing them out of education. Now, that isn't a system that I think we should be proud of. I think we need to immediately look at this system and call it what it is. It is unethical. The way that young people and students are being treated is completely unethical, and it needs an entire overhaul. So scrapping tuition fees for me is just one basic step. It makes the statement that we view education as a right. It is not a good. We are not trading it. Everyone deserves it. The society that we build depends on you getting an education. So it should be at a baseline free. That's the bare minimum. So we also need to fix the failures of the Tory government, ensuring that we reinvest in education properly to support tutors, lecturers, academics, cleaners, like I said, to have a proper wage, secure contracts on the conditions that they negotiated, and make sure that they're equipped to provide the best holistic education to students that you deserved. They can't do that while their rights are constantly under attack by this government. I was also a parliamentary candidate in the last general election, and something that I had hoped we would do, but we didn't, and something that I repeatedly called for was for us to also commit to a fund for workers to retrain, to re-attend higher education, because you'll do degrees and things now, you'll go on to work, but the industries that you work in will change, and right now is on the cusp of a huge change, because if we're going to reinvest in, for example, I don't know, renewable energy, people that work in sectors that are, for example, like oil, not based around renewable energy, those jobs are going to start disappearing. So where do those workers go? We need to make sure that we support people to retrain and retransition into the kind of jobs that we want to see in our future society. So it's a complex issue. There's lots of layers to it, but mostly I think, you know, if we have this vision, if we make sure we oppose the current structures that exist and oppress students, staff, and everyone in between, we need to make sure that we have students' voices at the heart of it across the spectrum of higher education, from colleges to universities, and also that we capture the staff's voices within that from across the spectrum of staff that uphold the education industry in spite of the conditions that they have to work under.
Thank you for that. Leading on to sort of the next question, what role should the trade unions have in society? I think this time we're going to go Jess, then Kathleen, then Ellie, please.
I think Ellie answered that past one.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Ellie didn't answer the last one.
Yeah, I didn't get to answer the last question. Can I?
Yeah. Just okay.
Sorry, I completely forgot about that. I thought you'd started for some reason.
It's all right.
My bad.
That's no problem. Am I good to go, or do we have to move on? Okay, brilliant.
Oh, no, go.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for Jess and Kathleen for pointing that out too. I was like, have I been forgotten? So I think it's a really, really good question. And I think there are loads of different levels and layers. And it's something that really we need to put right when we get into government. Currently, we need to push to end tuition fees right here, right now. Education needs to be free at the point of use. My parents went to university for free. They got their degrees for free. They were the first in their families to do so. And I don't see why that opportunity has been taken away from our generation now. It's unfair and it's not right. And we need to change that right now. You know, as well as that, we need to take students out of relative poverty and give them enough money to live. I think in Wales, we got it, well, we sort of did the best that we could of a bad situation of we had to put tuition fees up from £3,000 to £9,000, and I worked with Kirsty Williams on this bill. But what instead we did was we made our student loans the same price as tuition fees. So all students from Wales have £9,000 regardless of your background. And then depending on your parents' financial situation, it varies of how much you have to pay back. And I think that's a really, really good system. As much as I think we need to scrap tuition fees, I think giving students enough money to live is really important, and we need to look at that. You know, as Jess said, with universities and their models, they need a complete overhaul. I've seen it in my university, and I've seen it in my boyfriend's university, and in all universities, I think, across the UK. They're business first, education second, and that just isn't acceptable, and it isn't right. You know, we've seen it in this pandemic that they put students at risk because of the business, and they put students at risk because they need the money. In Liverpool, we have around 90,000 students in the city, constituting 4 different universities. And realistically, it's not safe. It's not safe for students to come back. I was having this conversation yesterday on campus where we said, you know, we shouldn't be here. We should be learning remotely, and the fact that we are here is just proof in the pudding that they don't care about our health, they don't care about the risk to the public, they want their money. I think apprenticeships, something that I feel very passionately about. Apprenticeships need more funding. We need a complete overhaul of our focus on away from, you know, you can't get anywhere if you don't have a degree. I think that's stupid, and I think it's defunct. We need focus on apprenticeships. We look at Europe for models. We look at Germany and France for models. They have more people in apprenticeships than they do doing degrees, and I think that's so important. We need real skills. We need real training, and we can't just shut out people over, frankly, it's snobbery of saying, oh, you're stupid, you're sick, you're not academically inclined. Okay, so, you know, you go and work for minimum wage. That's just not right. We need to give these people the skill sets. We need to give students skill sets that fits them rather than, you know, one degree fits all. I think as well as that, we need to ensure that especially blue collar workers, who a lot of people have been made redundant and will be made redundant in and around COVID, we need to give them the reassurance that if they want to retrain, if they want to go back to higher or further education, they can. It should be free and accessible to them. Everyone who wants to retrain, especially in this digital age that we're going into, should have the opportunity to do so. And it is so important that we see that in the education system, and we see that as an education policy.
Thank you for that. Again, really sorry about the mix-up. So now going to the next question. I can't even read my own list of questions, honestly. So the next question is, what role should the trade unions have in society? And this time, can we go Kathleen, Ellie, and then Jess?
Great. There was a dog that was put up in a previous, and I don't know how the dog is, but I hope the dog's doing well. I saw the dog like pass through I hope it's doing fine. Okay. So trade unions in society. So the trade unions have a fantastic movement, and the idea of being in a trade union is a great thing. Unfortunately, the numbers, it's not as big as it was 30, 40, 50, 70 years ago. But actually, I would argue that trade unions are actually needed now more than they've probably ever been needed, especially for young people. So I think trade unions in society are another big question. Everyone should be in a trade union. And my honest opinion is that the minute you turn 16 and you get your national insurance number on that day, it should also be an idea that you are to join a trade union the minute that happens, because you will need your trade union for whatever job you're in, for multiple jobs you're in, for whatever the future is going to hold for you as a young worker, for the next 60, 70, 80 years of your life. Because to be quite honest, they have the role that the trade unions have played, especially in the past 3 or 4 months, in terms of, I saw the other day the Musicians Union is doing work with the government to try and get funding for musicians that are struggling, whether that's GMB, my union, in trying to retrain people, whether that's the work Unite is doing, whatever union you want to say, they have stepped up to the mark on the whole, and they are providing services and they are providing support for people, regardless of what COVID situation they're in. I just think that, I joined a trade union because my mum told me to, and I just did what I was told, and I didn't really think about it. But I don't know any of my friends that are in trade unions. And I think that that's really, really sad, because actually our young workers need to join a trade union. And quite frankly, if you don't vote for me, then, I'll be sorry, but please do join a trade union off the back of this. Like, if there's one thing I can take away from this, like, join a trade union, because you might not think that you need it now, but in 5 or 6 years' time, you'll look back and be grateful that you did. I think what's also really interesting, and that I've seen in the news a lot, is a lot of companies seem to be having this anti-trade union campaigns. Amazon is one of my favorite ones to point out, and I've said in previous hustings, this idea that you don't need to be in a trade union because Amazon's going to look after you, or that you should be penalized, or that there are problems with you joining a trade union, or how much it might cost. It's so expensive to join a trade union. It's not. It's literally a tenner. Mine's less. Like, it's really not that at all. And I think the trade union movement hasn't been strong enough in providing a case for why young people especially need trade unions. I think trade unions will always be impactful in society, but what can I, in terms of these big answers, I have to try and skew it back to what I can realistically do, or what Jess or Ellie can do if we are elected Young Labour chair. And quite frankly, the answer is kind of continue to build with the trade union movement. So I would like it to be that there is a trade union official, or that there is some kind of understanding that a youth officer at every single CLP or a Young Labour group has access to several trade union, whether they're like consultants or people that work in trade unions, to come and explain to the young workers or at Young Labour meetings why trade unionism is so important. And, even if you don't join, Unite or GMB, whatever one you join, it's exceptionally important that young workers and young people, no matter what they're doing, are there to join trade unions. So I think that kind of is a priority. That would be a priority for me. I'd also love to see within the trade unions some kind of developmental pathway for young people. So a lot of my union GMB has a lot of programs that you can kind of retrain on, that you can learn new things, you can qualify, you can do good things. But I often don't really hear about it because I'm not Because aside from being like on the website, or I only hear about them on Twitter, or sometimes I don't hear about them at all until it's too late, and then I don't really know how to fill out the application form or whatever it is. So I'd like to see a continued partnership between Young Labour and the trade unions, and that's not kind of at a national level, that's really just at a local level. So that's whether that's, you know, every head of like a local Young Labour having a partnership, or making sure that they come and speak to Young Labour members across the UK several times a year. That's kind of what I look to do. I'd also really want to see some kind of partnership between Young Labour, or kind of, you know, the Labour movement, and this concept that young workers deserve better. I know it was said earlier, this idea of like minimum wage being like you can afford to live on minimum wage, or actually that you can afford to live on minimum wage, or that it's totally acceptable for young people to have 3 or 4 jobs where they're actually, you know, not given any rights because they're just freelance, or this idea that you can be furloughed from a job and then never, you know, and are expected to work, or whatever situation that young people are currently facing. It's a multitude of problems that, you know, everyone that I know that's a young person has some kind of work that's been disrupted in the past 9 months because of COVID. And there's a lack of understanding about what the Young Labour movement can do in partnership with the trade unions to challenge the government on this. And whether that's, you know, I'm lucky enough to have volunteered with the PCS strike. There are workers in Tate galleries across the UK who basically have been fired and like tried to be rehired, and they've gone on strike, and I've been lucky enough to work with them. They're a fantastic union, they're doing great work. But that's one example of what will be hundreds upon hundreds of like strikes and protests and issues that young members will have, and that trade unions will need help on. So just kind of in terms of answering your question, trade unions have a really huge role to play in society, and they will continue to do so. But Young Labour needs to partner with them as much as possible, and the Labour movement needs to partner with them to making sure that young workers and that our young members are getting the best offer, and they have that protection whenever they may need it.
Cracking. Ellie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think is so important, and the way that it's sort of been dumbed down in its importance is just, it's something that's really, really upsetting and sad to see. I'm a member of the Young Workers Forum for the TUC, so it's an advisory committee, and it's made up of young workers from all different unions and all different sectors on how we can involve young members and ensure that young members are given a safe space in trade unions, wherever they may want to go within the trade union movement. And it is so important that we really signal, especially to the leadership, how important trade unionism is. I joined a union when I was 17. I was sexually harassed in my place of work. I was a waitress while I was at sixth form, and my manager came and bit me on the neck. And, you know, it's stuff like this that we really need to ensure that young workers know that they have this support. I didn't know I had that support. I didn't know what I could do. I didn't know what to do. And luckily, because of my dad and how he was helped so much with his union prospect when he was made redundant from his job in 2010, he sort of pushed me in the right direction and went, you know, you need to join a union. This is why you should join a union. And I'm very aware that a lot of young people don't have that opportunity of somebody telling them, look, this is the importance of joining a union. And I pledge, if elected chair of Young Labour, that I will host a series with the TUC and working with different unions to discuss with young people in our party the importance of a union, why they should be in a union, what is a union. You know, I find it absurd, and I always get really sort of shocked by this statistic that 1 in 10 of people under 27 are a member of a union, and it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. I think under 19-year-olds, so 16 to 19-year-olds, 3% are a member of a union, and it's just not good enough. And like I say, this is due to a series of different reasons. This is because the private sector, you know, as Cathleen pointed out with Amazon, they push that you shouldn't join a union, and you're sort of, you know, you're ignoring ignored or your workplace is made tougher if you are a member of a union. That's just not good enough. I think what the Tories have done, especially in making this sort of a culture war with unions, that if you're in a union, then you're bad and you're some sort of communist and how dare you come into our workplace. It's just totally unacceptable. Everyone should be in a union, and I think it's a really good idea that we, at the point of signing up to the Labour Party, you should be given the choice of what union you should join and what union fits for you. And I definitely think with young Labour members especially, oh sorry, I've just got a PM. Oh sorry, thank you Ben, that's really kind. But yeah, I think at the point of signing up, especially for young members, they should be given the choice on what trade union to join. As Kathleen says, it's something that for young members, it is really cheap to join a union. I pay, I think, around £2 a month for my union membership, and I know there are cheaper ones out there. I think the GMB is something like £1.06 or something like that. It's really good. So yeah, if you go away from this call doing one thing tonight, please join a union if you haven't already.
Is it me? I'm up. Cool. Okay. So what role should trade unions have in society? Basically, I believe trade unions exist to redistribute power to the workers against a system that works to protect the elite in society. I'm very, very proud and humbled to have been endorsed by Unite the Union, GMB, the Bakers Union, CWU, FBU, and ASLEF. And I believe firmly that the Labour Party is the political arm of the trade union movement. So within Labour, the role that trade unions play is to ensure that workers' voices are being heard and that they support, obviously, Labour into government where we can implement changes in society that protect workers. It's really that simple, I think. The role they play in the wider society is absolutely huge. Obviously, pay, we know, is at an all-time low. In-work poverty is at an all-time high. Work conditions are reducing in quality. And as we're all kind of scrambling for the remaining jobs that there will be after the COVID crisis, which is obviously something that is really worrying for a lot of students, employers will take this opportunity to push down pay and push down the worst possible terms for contracts. And we've already seen like a number of industries that have been failing. What the employers have done is fired everybody on those contracts so that they can rehire them on worse terms. And I know Unite have been working tirelessly to address this. So I think, simply the free market really has proven time and time again, it doesn't act ethically when it is unrestricted. Free market doesn't care if you can feed your kids. It doesn't care if you can't afford a bus to work. It doesn't care if you're a trainee nurse having to work on absolute pittance of a pay and then have to work extra hours after your 12-hour shift as a cleaner on the same ward you work as a nurse at just to get enough to live on. So a union is about creating power amongst the workers. So while big bosses and corporations will continue to exploit us, and they absolutely will throughout a crisis, just because we're in a crisis doesn't mean that they're going to stand with us. We have to fight back. And a union is a way to turn the tables in our favour. That's through collectivism. That's through the essence of organising together and standing together to say, you know what, you may have money, you may have all this wealth, but actually we can withdraw our labour and stand together to make sure that you can't profit off of us. You can't profit while you treat us like this. So I think it's really important that we always endeavour to support workers and trade union action. So I've supported pretty much every strike I can remember seeing. And I think that that's something we really, really need to do. So if I can ask one thing of anyone at any point, I'm always like, as we head into rainy, cold season, if you see strikers and you stand with them, it means the world of difference. One of my key pledges this election, I won't go on for too long because I've talked about this so much, but if you do want to read more about it, I've written about it quite extensively in Tribune, is to create and launch a young workers conference, which we've never had before. And that is to make sure that young workers and the struggles that they're facing are embedded within the organisation of Young Labour, because at the moment it's very separate. And although we have young workers on, like Young Labour National Committee, for example, I'm a young worker and I'm on the committee, and although we raise those issues, we can't represent every sector, and we need to be much more wide-reaching to workers across the UK and across every industry. So that's something that I will be fighting for as soon as possible if elected chair. And then the other thing is we need to make sure that we are explicitly calling for Labour to demand that we repeal the anti-trade union legislation. And also another reason that I think we need to be a really strong opposition, and the left have proven that they are the ones prepared to do this, is opposing the legislation that we're currently seeing forced through by the Tories that endanger trade unionists to exploitation. So things like the Spy Cops bill, which legally allow trade unionists to be exploited, to be spied on and treated completely awfully, you know, we've abstained on. And I think, you know, while the trade unions support us, and when we are the party of trade unions, we have to stand up against these injustices that we see in Parliament and through the Tories' policies. So I think trade unions are kind of really at the heart of our movement, and yeah, very proud trade unionists.
Thank you for that, everybody. We've only got a few more questions left, don't worry, we're not going to keep going on forever. Next one is, how do we tackle the climate crisis? If we can start with Ellie, then go Jess, then go Kathleen, that would be great.
What a brilliant question. I think it's something that we've seen, it's affected us all, just how bad the climate crisis is. And it's been really invigorating and really positive to see us, I think, especially last summer with the Extinction Rebellion movement. I think that was so impressive. And I think it's something that, you know, if anyone was a part of or just saw it online, it was something that really made me proud for the youth of Britain, that, you know, we had these brilliant people across the country. You know, we had it in Cardiff, which never happens. Nothing happens in Cardiff. So to see it, like I say, across the country, it was something that was so phenomenal. And I think it spoke volumes of the strength and the power of youth. And I think it's something that we really need to go back with. We need to talk to Extinction Rebellion. We need to ask them, you know, we need to go to the experts and say, look, what can we do? What can we do, you know, in Young Labour? What can we do as the Labour Party as a whole to support the climate crisis? You know, we've seen it with the Tories, how they simply don't care about the climate crisis. I've seen that they're opening a coal mine up in the north and it's the first coal mine to be opened in decades. And it's just wrong. We should put our focus into reusable energy and renewable energy right now. We should be seeing, you know, where we can, reusable energy being used. We should, you know, in the Labour Party, we shouldn't support fracking. We shouldn't support anything that goes against, especially the Paris Accord, and the climate. You know, the climate crisis is something that we really need to put front and centre of our movement. I think what Rebecca Long-Bailey did with the Green New Deal that she presented was absolutely phenomenal, and it was incredible. And it's something that I think we can all get behind. In Labour, especially Young Labour. Like I say, you know, we've seen with this climate crisis, youth really taking charge of what we need and what the world needs and what our environment needs. And I think it's up to youth to really push that forward and push, like I say, what Rebecca Long-Bailey especially did with the Green New Deal forward, and make sure that when we eventually get into government, whenever that may be, hopefully sooner than 2024, but whenever we see it, we ensure that it is implemented. You know, we're seeing it implemented in Wales. We're seeing where we can with the Welsh Labour government that they do implement Green New Deals and green policies, and we need to see it across the UK.
Thank you for that. Jess, do you want to go next?
Thank you. These are huge questions.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to get as much sort of territory covered as possible. So yeah, sorry for the breadth of the
questions. I love it. Well, a green industrial revolution, not the crap one that Boris is coming out with, but the one that we designed and that Becky designed in the last general election. But it needs to go further than that and be much more detailed. I think that it was amazing that we turned that around in the time that we had it. But basically, we need to be calling for the democratic ownership of industries that make sure that they work for people and for planet, not for profit. I'm going to talk a little bit about some local things. I'm really sorry if this isn't as exciting, but I just know lots about the current situation in Norfolk, and I'm sure you guys do too. The situation in Norfolk is that we've had the Conservatives at Norfolk County Council commit to 2030 carbon neutrality. That's something that I worked on. I'm really proud to have achieved it, but at the same time they're still forcing through projects which absolutely decimate our local green areas and make reaching that target completely impossible. So the one I'm talking about now is the Western Link Road. If you haven't heard about it, please check them out on Twitter. There's a campaign to stop it being built. It also will kill absolutely loads of wildlife in our beautiful local areas. So something we need to do is make sure that also local councils are prioritising our climate targets, because at the moment they are just operating completely unrestricted, as we're seeing in Norfolk at the moment. If we look a little bit further afield, something that we didn't touch on in the last election was what we would do internationally to acknowledge the fact that actually the climate crisis is already here for many people. And so those particularly in the global south will need our support, will need aid, but also we need to make sure that we are accepting refugees through climate change if that eventually, and it will happen. So that's something that we absolutely as Labour Party need to be championing. And also we need to be sharing green technology that we develop internationally too, because we can't tackle the climate crisis just in the UK. We're not in a bubble. And so if we are developing these industries, we need to be sharing that technology with other countries to ensure that we all do our bit to tackle the climate crisis. This can't be an opportunity for us to make money for shareholders and individuals and corporations. It has to be that we collectively do this together. Something I already touched on earlier was retraining schemes. So we need to make sure that we support people to retrain in these industries. In Great Yarmouth, we have one of the biggest offshore wind farms. I believe it's going to be the biggest in Europe soon. I don't know if it's reached that yet. But people locally haven't been able to take up those jobs. So most people have been commuting from London and taking employment from London and into the kind of the wind farm there. And so what I would like to see is that the people that previously worked on the docks and the oil rigs, those kinds of things, be supported and economically supported, retrained to take up those jobs, and make sure that when we transition into this green society, this green economy, whatever we want to call it, that we bring every community with us, because this is absolutely huge and we can't just impose it on people. We need to bring people along with us. In terms of Young Labour as a movement, we need to be much more vocal on this. It is something that we have been supportive of, but we need to do much more. And I would like to see Young Labour at the forefront of this fight for climate justice. Something that we were really proud of last time was that, you know, our Labour's green policies were ranked better than the Green parties. Now that's not something that we can just kind of sleep on now and say we've done enough. We haven't done enough until we've done it, until we've implemented it. So I'd like to see us keep going, keep marching with people who are demanding better, keep standing with local campaigns to stop development of things that put our society at risk, and make sure that we energise and support movements for justice like the school strikers, and if that is XR, but obviously with a class analysis in there as well.
Great. So luckily you've asked a really small question which can literally be answered in 2 or 3 sentences. So like X. So this is great that you're talking about the climate crisis. This is fantastic that we're talking about the big thing. So I will try and very much answer it in under 2 minutes. But I will try my best. So the picture of where we are. Fridays for the Future on their climate strikers, that it's an example of young people fighting back and like demanding better. And I would say actually it's been fantastic. Like I've been to many of the school strikes. I've seen them across the UK. It is actually generally really heartening to see young people leading the way and demanding change from their local representatives. I think that's fantastic. I would love to see, if possible, kind of more of a link between what Young Labour is versus kind of Young Labour and what we're doing versus that kind of movement. I realise that they're apolitical, but I think in terms of offering support or maybe trying to have a collaboration between them, I think that would be fantastic. I'd also say, like, young people are going to be faced with the climate crisis and the problems that the climate crisis will cause more than any other generation. And I am just one person, but I kind of realised that if you want to see change, like one person can do a huge amount. And if you don't believe that, I would say go and sit in a room with Greta Thunberg, because she has completely brought this to the front. This young woman has basically brought it to the front of the political debate and has gone into frontline politics from nothing and has achieved fantastic things. And I'm sure will go on to challenge a a load of stale white men a lot more, which is great to see, and we're always pro that. So I'd probably try and have some kind of collaboration between what she's doing and what we're doing in Young Labour. So I'm lucky enough to be endorsed by SERA, which is Labour's environmental campaign, and I'm also lucky enough in a previous thing that I've done would be I was a trainee beekeeper, and that's kind of what I do in my free time because I'm quite strange, but that's a story. Maybe that's a story for the pub. So what I would love to see in terms of the green industrial revolution and what Rebecca Long-Bailey wrote in 2019 was fantastic, but it was an add-on to the current. It kind of for me seemed like at the time when I was on the doorstep, it was like an add-on to what was several other add-ons, and what it actually should have been was the start and the base that everything else is built from. And I realized maybe there wasn't enough time to develop the policy, but looking forward, we have that time now. So I think it should be, this understanding that, our climate is failing, like we can already see the impacts of climate change. Even, me sitting in my kitchen, I can see the impacts of climate change. I see it on the news every day. I can see how it's affecting the global population and how it will continue to affect the global population. So whether that's like having an understanding that we need to completely change the bedrock of society to move away from fossil fuels, to start reforesting, to start rewilding, to start having renewable and sustainable lifestyles, whether that's renewable energy, going away from fossil fuels, whatever that kind of is, I'd love to see that as the bedrock of the next Labour manifesto, or the bedrock of like our next offer to voters. And maybe that means we have to go on the offensive and we have to explain a lot of things to people, and there has to be an understanding of this isn't good enough, and COVID has given us an opportunity to change society. This has been a terrible situation that we've been placed in, but the bedrock of society has shifted and we must now shift it again. And I hope that we can go towards a very sustainable and new future for the better, which I think young people will lead. I think what's kind of interesting to note is that there are 3 young women who are running for chair of Young Labour, but currently next year, there was supposed to be the Glasgow Climate Summit this year, and the UK delegation was all male. So the people that are making changes are all white and all male, and one of them is Boris Johnson and the other one's his dad. So I really question how much we're going to get out of the UK government for the next 2 or 3 years. So making sure that we are building the ground movement and working with partners, working with partners like the Green New Deal UK, they do fantastic work, working with our YES, our European partners, so that we have a green industrial revolution and we tie it in with the Green New Deal in America and what they're producing in Europe. I think that's fantastic. I'd love to see that as well. I could literally speak about this all day, like it would be amazing, but kind of that's maybe more of the what the national picture is, and maybe just a little bit more about what Young Labour can do. So I think it really starts with like political education and understanding of what one person can do, or what a group of students can do, or what a local councillor can do, whether that's like sustainable waste, whether that's like rewilding or reforesting, whether that's like understanding of like the local environment and how it will change, whether that's an understanding of what is and isn't wasteful behaviour, learning to think about these things differently, whether that's educating young people. I feel like Young Labour should be leading on this. We are the progressive movement for change. We are like the next generation, as I said earlier, the next generation of climate leaders, and like people in charge basically are on this group chat and like are sitting on this Zoom call. So that's kind of what I'd love to see. I think what we can do is provide education. We can work with the Shadow DEFRA team, we can work with our other stakeholders, whether that's Greta Thunberg, whether that's Fridays for the Future, and making sure that when the next election comes, we are the better Green Party, but we also support workers and we support jobs, and we don't just say, oh, here's what we want, and no explanation of it. We have an explanation of how society is going to change, what we want it to be, and maybe a little bit more updated just in terms of having it every other policy kind of come from that and not have it be like an extra page on a manifesto. So that's I'd really love to see that, but I have in the past couple of years been like completely overwhelmed to see how fantastic like young people are taking this so seriously and are literally willing to put their lives, their jobs, their careers on the line to see better change in the climate movement, which for me is like really, really inspiring. And if young people aren't going to make the change, then I'd love to see it.
Thank you so much for that, everybody. Another set of like great answers. Just picking up on what you said about me posing big questions, another one for you, so brace yourselves. Is Black Lives Matter a movement or a moment? Nice and easy questions for you, small topics. We'd like to keep it nice and light here. So I'm going to start with Jess, then go Kathleen, then go Ellie.
Gosh, you weren't kidding, were you? Yes, so it's not going to shock anybody here that I believe that Black Lives Matter is a movement. Why on earth we would be calling it a moment is completely insensitive and doesn't reflect what I believe to be the vast majority of the views of our movement. You know, this is something that came about as a result of a racially motivated, brutal murder of George Floyd, which triggered the movement that we saw as a result of people standing up and saying, we've had enough. These are our experiences of institutional structural racism. You're not listening, and we're sick and tired of it. And I find it really frustrating when we see people that have never experienced anything like this kind of talk down to movements like this when they are so emotive. They are from people's personal lived experience of racism and injustice. And so, yeah, I think for me, really clearly, it's a movement, and this isn't something that's going to go away overnight. And the government, and particularly the Tory government, think that they have done enough to appease this movement for the time being, but that's absolutely not the case. Everyone who's been part of that movement has seen that the Tories might pay them a bit of lip service, but nothing has changed, and until it does, we can't rest. So I think we need to do everything within our power to challenge that structural racism that exists, and that when we from when we see it to when we don't see it. I do support defunding the police. I know some absolutely horrific statistics around the way that the police treat Black communities. They often have 10 times more police at Notting Hill Carnival, for example, than at other events. There's no correlation between increasing policing and less crime as a result. It simply is a correlation between more policing and more racial profiling of Black communities. So I think that we need to be a strong opposition in fighting back against the racism that exists in society, from Parliament, within our party, wherever we see it, we have an obligation to challenge it. And how we do that is a really complex issue, but something that we need to do everything we can to address. So we need to obviously have the policies that back Black activists and say, we stand with you. So when Black activists are saying the police are racist, you need to defund them, we will say, we stand with you. We will implement that policy. There's no ifs or buts about it for me. We also have an obligation within our own party to do everything we can. So that means anti-racist education, which we need to roll out to members across, from every CLP to every young member. They need to be able to access these education programs. We also need to safeguard properly, and this is something I've talked about quite a lot, and I'm sorry to Ellie and Kathleen for going on about it again, but there is currently a safeguarding unit at HQ, but nobody knows them and they're very small. There needs to be a safeguarding officer in every region whose name So when you think key contacts in the Labour Party, you might think, okay, Starmer, he's the leader, but you also know your safeguarding officer who you can contact if you face discrimination, harassment, bullying, whatever it might be, a key contact that you can go to who can support you through what can be a really isolating process of challenging this when it exists so embedded in society. Alongside this, I think we need to do much more on the education topic. So in my day job, I support young people to take action on issues that are impacting them. So this month, because it's Black History Month, I've worked with Black young people in Norwich to develop a month worth of events. And as a result, they are hosting education events every Wednesday at 5:30 online, and I can follow up with a link if you want to tune into those. But this is led and run by Black young people, which is empowering them to educate people who otherwise, wouldn't understand the struggles that they're facing in society. So I think that this is work that's really important and brilliant, and I'm so pleased to be able to do it, to support those young people to do that. But it's something that I also think Young Labour should be doing. So I would really like to see us put the resources in to politically educating not only our membership, but wider society as well.
Thank you for that. Kathleen, do you want to go next, and then Ellie?
Sure, yeah. So Jess, never apologise for going on about safeguarding. It's exceptionally important. You won't get a claim from me about that, that's for sure. What I think is interesting on another note is that, to my knowledge, no Young Labour candidate has got any kind of contact from the Safeguarding HQ about what we're going through. But yet, I'm sure the other two candidates, and I know a lot of BAME candidates have told me privately that we get a huge amount of hate on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of unpleasant things sent to us, and yet we have no process to go through to make that in any way better. And that kind of makes me quite sad, and I hope that's something we can move on and we can kind of build on. So just to answer your question, Keir Starmer was completely wrong and completely out of line, and it was not an acceptable answer to say that the Black Lives Matter movement was a moment. I think he probably was briefed badly and he misspoke, and I'll kind of, but it's not good enough and it really can't be allowed to happen again is really what I would say. So I volunteer with the Stephen Lawrence Trust, and I see on a day-to-day basis what actually happens to young Black men in the UK and in cities, and how like the situation is so different that I experience to their experience, and I try and help as much as I can and try and give them a voice for a better society and for them to have better lives, but it's very, very difficult. And I think, you know, our government is most definitely racist, and our police service is also most definitely racist as well. I think that's not a huge thing to say, but I think it does need to be said. So what I think is, like, the Black Lives Matter movement is young people demanding better. It's a little bit like the climate movement. It's young people that want better, and it's young people and people that have seen the current state of affairs and don't like it and think that we can have a better future. And that's really exciting, and that's a fantastic thing to see. And I will, of course, support the Black Lives Matter movement in whatever capacity I end up in, hopefully as chair, but if not, I will just continue to support them anyway. I think it's really interesting to see, like, so Labour should really be the party of inclusion and diversity and promoting voices, but to be quite honest, I don't think we've done that, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement. So I mean, just as a fact, there are 3 Black male Labour MPs. It's not really good enough. Like, there should be a lot more. I think we're in a situation now where we've taken a lot of those votes for granted, and we haven't connected that community as well as we should have across the UK. And we will see, you know, as time goes on, we will see the bad impacts of that, the negative impacts of that. What I would say is also, you know, the Bernie Grant program is a fantastic program, but no one knows about it. So if you're a talented young BAME activist, or like you're somebody who's interested and has seen the situation and wants to improve, there are limited spots on this program, and it's like only once every 2 years. Like, how is that fair? So I think we've got to expand this idea that we can have these fantastic young Black activists who are calling for better and want better things, and we can put them into our movement and give them the tools that they need to succeed. And I think that, you know, I can only say so much on that, but I would love to see that extended, and I would love to see like a young Labour version of that, where you can have like young Black activists. One of my favourite ones, I would encourage you to Google him, is a guy called Atian Ayik, and he is absolutely fantastic because he has found a link essentially in his life between like stabbings and austerity, which is something that we all knew existed, but he has spoken out on that issue, and he is such an eloquent speaker. And I genuinely believe, like, I think I've said this to him several times, that you will see him in the future because he is a most fantastic activist. And he said that he really hasn't got enough support from the Labour movement. And I would love to see young Labour kind of work with people like him to support that. So that's kind of one example, but I'd also like to say, you know, I'm sure we all know the statistics on Diane Abbott. You know, she gets 50% of all online abuse to MPs. How is that fair? What is the Labour movement doing about it? I've yet to see any kind of safeguarding. I've yet to see additional support provided for her. I've yet to see an understanding that this movement is for everyone and that we are working together to achieve better. And that's not just for people that we need to vote for us in 4 years' time. That's for everyone. And no matter what you think, or who you are, or what your background is, the Labour movement is there, and our young Labour movement has to be there so that you can be given the tools that you need to succeed, or to speak out, or to have your voice. So, I mean, I know it's a very big picture answer, but it's a big picture question, so I feel like I have to say it. So just to kind of recap my answer, Keir Starmer was wrong to say that. The police are racist. We are in a situation where our party desperately needs reform to include the voices of young Black activists, whether that's expanding the Bernie Grant program, whether that's providing support to people like Diane Abbott, whether that's looking to work with the Black Lives Matter movement. I've seen very few meetings between the Stephen Lawrence movement and the Black Lives Matter movement and the Leader of the Opposition's office, for example. I'd love to see a little bit more collaboration going into the next few years. And standing in solidarity to have some kind of, I know other candidates have called for this, but this like anti-racism training across all of Young Labour. And that's not a half an hour program that you take once a year. That's a consistent thing that you have to go online and understand. So you have to understand, like, why somebody might be racist, why you might find a racist thing in Young Labour or in the Labour movement, and what you can realistically do about it to identify the problem and to produce a solution. And I think if we're able to do that, I think we will provide the next generation of like Black Lives Matter activists, and we will go on to win. You know, we will go on to win in a fantastic way, from ward to ward, community to community, to hopefully UK to UK. We can see a Labour government that's actually representative of everyone, including the BLM movement.
Ellie, do you want to jump in now?
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, the BLM movement, and it is a movement, it's not a moment. It's something that we have never seen before, and we've never seen the like of before. And it's just been phenomenal to see it stretch across the world, just how important it is to put Black lives first. We need to put Black lives at the centre and at the forefront of the conversation, because for so long they haven't been. They've been downtrodden, and it's just completely unacceptable. I think, speaking as a white woman, I can't begin to sort of connect to the struggles of being a Black person and the struggles of BLM. All I can do is offer my complete and utter solidarity, and where I can, I will always speak up for them and speak up for the movement. You know, as Jess and Kathleen have both said, it's not enough for us to simply be allies. It's not enough for us to simply be anti-racist. Young Labour has to be at the forefront of calls for action, for change, for real social equality for all people of colour. It is so important that we have diverse voices at every level of the Labour Party, and organisations like, we spoke to the 1987 caucus last week, the Labour BAME network and the Socialists of Colour. They're brilliant organisations that need to be at the forefront of our movement in every crevice of it, and especially in Young Labour. We can't pretend to be in this fight without first addressing our movement's own failings as well, which is why it's so important that we have groups like the 1987 caucus speak up. Because, you know, we have to like examine our own youth structures and the way we interact with each other online. There's already a horrific culture and of toxicity in Young Labour, and the fact that a BAME woman, and a very young BAME woman, was forced to drop out of running in this election is just simply not good enough. We need to demand real change to end this horrendous abuse that especially Black people we're seeing in our movement suffer. But not only that, BME people who are minorities anyway, they need to be at the forefront of our movement. They need to be protected. Young members in our party should always be empowered to engage with our party at every level, to educate, to inform, and to have their lived experience valued. We have to confront racism that still exists in our movement with a zero tolerance policy on harassment and bullying. It starts with listening to those lived experiences as well, like I say, and by reforming our safeguarding measures. You know, as Kathleen said, don't ever apologise, Jess, for talking about safeguarding. It is so important, and it's something that hasn't been spoken about enough in our party, especially in Young Labour, where, you know, safeguarding is something that, you know, our movement hasn't been good on, and we really need to ensure that it is, especially for BAME and people of colour. You know, new and existing members alike should receive anti-racist education, especially in our youth movements. We are, like I said earlier, we are the absolute bedrock of our party, and we need to ensure that everyone has that anti-racist training. I want diverse panels. I want workshops on Black Lives Matter. I want to increase awareness on anti-Semitism, not just in our party, but across society, because through my work with the Holocaust Educational Trust, as I'm their Northwest Regional Ambassador, you know, I've heard firsthand what extreme hate can do. I've heard firsthand what extreme hate can do to the Roma Gypsy community. And, you know, we have to ensure that our party upholds all minorities where it can. It is on all of us to take our cue from groups like the Labour BAME Network, Socialists of Colour, and the 1987 caucus, and be a part of this work. You know, just saying we support it isn't good enough anymore. And the fact that our leader said that it's a movement, is a moment, I think that's totally unacceptable. And I'm not sure if he has apologised. If he hasn't, he absolutely should. Like I say, it's something that's phenomenal, and it's something that's taken hold across our world. So yeah, it's absolutely a movement, and a movement that, you know, is on us as people of Young Labour, as members of Young Labour, to take forward.
Great, thank you so much to all of our candidates for those answers. It'll be great. You'll be happy to hear. Here's our penultimate question, set question now. It's been a long old Q&A, but we're to cover as much as possible, as I've said. So another sort of in keeping with the theme of solving all the world's issues in a 30-second segment, how will you actively defend trans rights in an increasingly reactionary environment? And this time, can we go Kathleen, then Ellie, then Jess?
Sure. So another huge question. The way that trans people have been treated in society is terrible and immoral and wrong, and the way that they've been treated in the Labour Party is immoral and wrong. Once again, like two broad statements, but both true. So we have, I think, several problems with like this understanding that trans rights are human rights, and that we are to treat them like they are our comrades and they are our brothers and our sisters, because we are all working together for a better society and a better Labour movement. And there is no point in us being in government, and there is no point in us winning anything if we are not doing it as a movement together, a movement that is inclusive of everyone, not just some people and not just other people, that we all work together to defend our rights and to progress our values. I think the Labour values, the reason why we're all here is because we believe in equality, we believe in fairness, we believe in tolerance and respect, and we believe in standing up for the rights of everyone, even if we're standing alone. And we haven't treated trans people, we haven't treated the LGBTQ plus community like that for a while, and that's really, really sad. So, kind of, general sweeping statements done. What can we do? So I think we have to call out people that are transphobic, even if they're our friends. And even if they're people that are on our factional side and we agree with, whether that's sitting MPs like Rosie Duffield, which the whip should be removed from, whether that's people like Laura Pidcock, who are, have made, transphobic statements, and people on their side of the factional debate are not calling them out for. I will not hesitate to call out my friends, and I will not hesitate to call out other people that basically do not stand up for trans rights. And I think the Labour Party on the whole should be promoting trans rights and should be working against the things that the government are currently doing, and saying actually the home for LGBTQ plus community is in the Labour movement, and it always should be in the Labour movement. And there shouldn't be a debate about that or a discussion. It should just be understood. So, calling out your friends or calling out high profile individuals who have transphobic views, whether that's removing the whip from Rosie Duffield, whether that's making sure Laura Pidcock isn't put on the NEC for her views on transphobia, I think that's something really simple that we all should have done by now. And I won't hesitate to call out my friends on things like that in the future. I think we kind of have to go back to like equalities training that everyone should have. Every young Labour member should have equalities training, and to understand how we can make our movement a better place to be and a more inclusive place to be. That shouldn't be, what currently is, which is half an hour once a year. That should be across the year. That should be in every CLP, in every young Labour group, across and as far as we can have it. I think there's also challenging this Tory rhetoric that's coming out of several things that have come out of the government recently, which are anti-trans rights. It's completely ridiculous, and it should be stopped at every single level. Whether that's creating safe spaces for people, whether that's understanding that maybe they need a little bit more support, and maybe we need to provide that for for people that stand. If you stand and you're trans, you're going to get a lot more hate than somebody who isn't, for example. And I think the Labour Party, especially Young Labour, has to be really key in safeguarding and support and making sure that those people feel the need to want to stand and want to be in our movement, because we, as I said earlier, we want them to be together and we want to work with them in the future. So I think you've got to, consistently standing up for trans rights, consistently standing up for our comrades in that community, increasingly showing solidarity. That's more than just a tweet. That's actually, if they're your friends and they have transphobic views, then there's no room for them in our movement. There's an understanding that you can change your view and you can go through education, but if you consistently have discriminatory views and you consistently are, anti those kind of rights, there's no place for you in our movement, and there's no change on that. I think that the leadership especially has not been strong enough on this, and this is one of the things I definitely challenge. And within Young Labour, I think there needs to be a lot more support given to young trans members, or people that think they might be trans, or people going through transitioning, or whatever situation they might be in. And I'd love to see, in a couple of years' time, if I'm lucky enough to win, or if the other two are, I'd love to be able to look back and see these fantastic new trans candidates that are standing, or LGBTQI plus candidates that's on a level never seen before, because they have the support and the tools that they need to be successful. And I would really love to see that. And I think until we see that, until we look back and see that like those people are leading our movement, and people, the LGBTQI plus community, are leading our movement, I think, to be quite honest, everything I have to say is just words, and everything the other two candidates have to say is at the minute just words, until we can look back, where one of us is elected, and we can look back and see the work that has been done. So I'm sorry, that's kind of quite a big answer, but I think that there's so much to be done, and the Labour Party is not doing enough on this, and it's totally not okay. And it's like discriminatory views and discriminatory practice against our trans comrades. And it makes me really sad to see, because the Labour movement is for everyone. Like, we are for the many, but we are also, for the many, not the few, but, for everyone, whatever you might identify as, and whatever journey, that people are on and people grow. It's so sad to see, and I'd love to see a little bit more done on this, especially from Young Labour, and especially from our lead the opposition, especially from Keir. There needs to be a lot more done. But I can go about this all day. It makes me really angry, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you for that. Can we now go Ellie, then Jess? Sorry, I realise I keep pointing. It's because I know we have different people on different places in our screens, but no one knows what I'm doing. It's fine.
It's like orchestral, like, you're almost a conductor. I really like it. But no, on the issue of trans rights, it's, I think first and foremost, we have to come out and we have to absolutely condemn anyone who is transphobic in the Labour Party. They have no say, they have no place in the Labour Party, and there should be a complete zero tolerance to any transphobia that we see. The fact that we're seeing an elected official being transphobic openly and consistently is frankly not good enough. I think it's awful. I do think the whip should be removed. I think at least she should be suspended. I think she should be condemned by the leadership. I did see that Angela Rayner did speak out against it a few days ago, but it's just not good enough. We need action now. We need to stand with our trans comrades now and say, look, we stand with you. Labour is the home for marginalised groups. Labour is the home for trans people. And the fact that we've got people in our movement who are making it harder for trans people to be the best activists they can be is just simply not good enough. I can't imagine as a cisgender person just how tough and hard it is for trans people at the best of times, but the fact that you've got people in your own party who are speaking out against you is just not good enough. And we have to condemn that right here, right now. We have to condemn people like Laura Pidcock. They should not hold positions of power. If you're being transphobic, you shouldn't be in any sort of position in the Labour Party. It's been really nice. I think, we've been on a few hustings now, and it's been really, really good and really positive that we're getting this question consistently about how we can support trans people and how we can speak out against transphobia wherever we see it. My mum has been in an open relationship. Sorry, not in an open relationship. My mum has been in a relationship with a trans woman now for 6 years. And it's been really tough going, I think, for all of us to just see the sort of the hatred and the bigotry around their relationship. Even from my dad, he refuses to sort of acknowledge Maeve as a woman. He actively calls her, a thing, which is just horrific. And I think it's awful as a society that we aren't speaking up for trans people. And, that has to be a part of the Labour Party too. We have to speak up for the Labour Party. And we need to speak up as young people and say, look, if we see transphobia, it's just not good enough. Like I say, I've seen it firsthand, just what transphobia looks like and just how awful it can be. I've seen it in my own family. And we really have to do more as a movement. Wherever we see it, we call out and we put a zero tolerance policy there and there.
Thanks, Jess. Do you want to take the floor now?
Of course. I'm just going to introduce you all to Bella, who's just joined us for this question.
I did see earlier, I was tempted to ask her the questions as well. Like, she should get like her own segment.
She is a true comrade in the fight against transphobia. You can check out her Instagram, which is full of anti-TERF content. Gosh, this one, where do we start? Right, firstly, I think it's really important we say solidarity to trans comrades, I guess, in society, those who are still in the party and those who have left the Labour Party in absolute waves of numbers. I'm really, really sad to say, like, a huge number of my friends who are trans, who were Labour members, have now left. They don't believe that this is the party that will stand by them, and they don't believe that Labour Party is the party for those facing oppression and being marginalised. And I think that until that, well, every day that is the case, that a trans member feels that way, then we're not doing enough. We have really, really damaged our relationship with the trans community, and it's really, really upsetting to see, because obviously something that I've talked about previously is, you know, we have a really proud history in sort of modern history, I guess, when the miners' strikers united with the LGBT community against the police and against the Thatcher government who were oppressing them. That's when this solidarity between the LGBT community and our movement of the Labour movement was forged. And I feel like we are completely throwing that under the bus and creating a narrative about not wanting to address culture wars or something like this, which is completely ridiculous and not Labour values. This is an issue I've been really passionate about for a long time. A few years ago, a trans member in Norwich approached me and said that they wanted to get my advice on something. So they had spoken to our MP, Clive Lewis, about concerns over the GRA and this increasing transphobia that seemed to be growing in society. And they were really unhappy with his response, which was kind of middle of the ground and not really recognising the issue. So they brought it to me, and I was really upset because obviously, you know, we're really lucky to have a Labour MP. And so I worked with this member to lobby Clive to adopt a stronger position. And we also moved a motion in support of trans comrades and positive changes to the GRA, I think now 2.5 years ago, probably quite a while ago now. So obviously that was probably before a lot of people were aware of this debate, but it has increasingly become more and more toxic, more and more organised on the side of the TERFs, who attack trans people online and attack their allies really viciously. So I have tried to make it my effort to do everything I can to support trans comrades to deal with this and to address it. So I have been active in writing. Oh, I was seeing an additional question, I'll come to that. Been active in writing solidarity motions to circulate across the LPs. I also wrote an open letter with LGBT members calling on the leadership to take an action on this, and also not just calling against the Tories and the moves that they're making to take down trans rights, but for progressive, we need to adopt policies that are progressive in changing the GRA and making it a less intrusive process, and making sure that we support trans people whatever stage of their transition they are at. We also, we also have a number of transphobes living in Norwich, Graham and Linda Bellos. So there has been action locally, which I've supported, where we have hijacked their meetings, where they have tried to say that trans people can't access their chosen toilets and things like this. So there's been a lot of action to support trans people locally too. Nationally, right, first things first, Rosie Duffield needs to not be a Labour MP anymore. She had any shame or any care for the people that she pretends to represent, then she would stand down herself. And the leadership, every day that they don't suspend her and remove the whip, is a failure to trans people. So she absolutely has no place in our movement. Anyone who is baiting the trans community like she is needs to be out of our movement. They have no place here, and we can't provide a safe space to people that their only purpose is to spread hate and try to make sure that trans people feel unwelcome. That's not what our movement's about. So we need to do much more to address transphobia in our party. We need to educate people on this. I have repeatedly condemned Laura Pidcock publicly. I wrote an article for Tribune where I called on the left to do better in selecting candidates who stand by trans people. I'm aware that there's sort of been a narrative that the left isn't calling out these people. Well, there's a number of us actually who every single time have said we're fed up with this. I have called on Laura to sign the Labour campaign for trans rights pledges, and the same for Anne Henderson. I won't be voting for either of them in the upcoming NEC elections, because I haven't seen that they have changed their ways or educate themselves on this matter. So I just want to make that really, really clear. We aren't just line followers. We're not just here to kind of follow slate lines. We are here to make sure that we defend Labour values, that we stand up for people facing oppression. I firmly believe you are either with the oppressor or with the oppressed, and I make an effort to stand with the oppressed, because I absolutely don't want to be part of a party that fails one of the most marginalised groups in society. And then the only other thing to add from this is that this is a topic that is hugely important to me, because a huge number of my work is supporting trans young people. So I have been supporting trans young people to transition for the last 5 years, to do mediation with their family members who are often intolerant of these things. And I also do a lot of work supporting LGBT young people in their schools, and often their schools are really intolerant of these things. So my work often is supporting them around their mental health, but also being an ally for them in the fight back for their rights. So I'm sorry that was a really long answer. I just got a few extra questions in the text and wanted to elaborate. But yes, trans rights, fuck TERFs. There we go.
Okay. Thanks to for another round of like brilliant answers to all of our panelists. I think we're safe to say this is a pretty turf-free zone. It's just sad that all places in Labour aren't at the moment, but we'll get there eventually. Now we have like our final set question before, and I would say our most important question really, before we open up the floor to any Q&A questions that people want to ask. So, as I said, most importantly, what are you all having for dinner tonight? Just because I'm really curious, like it's quite late and I'm really hungry. So, what are you all feeling? What are you going for? Answer in any order you want. It's a free for all.
I'll take this one first. So just because I'm really excited. So Papa John's currently are doing a student deal, so you can get a free medium pizza. And so my boyfriend, because I'm seeing him for the first time in 3 weeks, is giving me the luxury of having a medium free pizza, and I'm incredibly excited for it. So it's my treat to myself after this.
So
I'm jealous.
That's fair enough, go Ellie. Sorry, so I made the bad decision to not eat before this hustings started, which I've like actually regretted. And you might have seen earlier that I sneaked in a banana because I desperately felt the need to have some kind of nourishment. So apologies if you saw me mid-chew. So I mean, you know, another big question: what am I having for dinner? It's you know, it's on the same level as like, how do we solve the climate crisis? But I'm going to try and answer briefly. No, I'm just kidding. So it's probably gonna. I've just gone veggie for like the month of October. So it's probably going to be some kind of veggie lasagna or something like that. I had like a stir fry yesterday that was kind of veggie, so I might have a little bit more of that. But you know, I can let you know on my Twitter later exactly what happens, and you can follow it, you know, step by step as that process goes on.
I'll retweet it so that the people can find out. This is the really important content. Like, we love a lasagna.
Okay. Oh well. I have to be honest. I've got to be honest.
Don't worry. It could just be rustic. Everything's just rustic when it's not very pretty.
Okay, that's what they're calling it now. Okay.
Jess, what are you going for?
Oh gosh. I ordered a namaste. Has everyone been to namaste before?
Ooh.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm a vegan, and they do like vegan curries that are like amazing. But while I was a little bit distracted in some of that, so I had it up here just before we started, and I went and got my cat some tuna, because I was like, oh, I don't want her to be jealous, you know, we're socialists here, we all deserve a treat tonight. Gave her tuna before this started, and then she was like trying to eat my food during this call, and I was like, definitely don't want curry. So that's what I had already, and it was delish. Recommend namaste. They do that dosa on the wall thing as well, where you can like pay a bit extra and then they give a free dosa to someone who might be homeless or can't afford food.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's really cute. Yeah. I really like them, but they're quite spenny. They're like, I think they're only in Norwich, but like if you ever come to Norwich, either of you,
if you order from the village one rather than the city centre one, I think it's cheaper.
Ooh, noted. Thank you. So now I think we have got a couple of moving away from that really hot content. See, there's a pun in that because we were talking about curry. I'll stop. Fine. Now I think we've got a couple of questions that people want to ask. So they can either type it up or they can just unmute themselves and go for it. As I said, it can be a free for all from now on.
I'll ask at once, guys.
Yeah, and Niall, I know you had a question, so do you want to go first? Everyone's so polite here.
Yeah, hi, yeah, can you hear me? Oh, yeah,
Yep.
Cool, thank you. I just wanted to ask, so the speakers, everyone talks a lot about the sort of changes within the Labour Party, but I'm curious as to what everyone thinks about how to branch into the almost unpoliticised sections of the working class and the communities that have never traditionally engaged with the mainstream Labour movement, either through the Labour Party or through the trade unions. Thank you.
Hey, so do you guys want to sort of, as I said, free for all, just go for it, whoever wants to take it first?
This always happens with us. We all, whenever we're like left up to our own devices, we'll sit here like politely like, do you want to go first?
Well, it's definitely a female thing a lot of the time as well.
I said this on the last call, yeah. I'm happy to take it if you guys want me to. Yeah. Okay. So how do we reach out to communities that have kind of been traditionally not politicized? That was the question, yeah? Yeah, great question. Well, I am from Kings Lynn originally. And it's one of those areas, yeah, big up. It's one of those areas where there's a huge amount of deprivation, a huge amount of inequality, and it's exactly the kind of seat where you think, well, they must have a Labour MP. But it's consistently conservative, and it has been for as long as I can ever remember. And that kind of echoes the situation for countless areas and communities across the UK. So there was obviously a point at which Labour has always been on the back foot, like for starters. The Conservatives have traditionally done better than us at elections because people turn out more who tend to be Conservative voters. And particularly in the last few years, I feel like, or last 20 years, there has been a sort of breach of trust with a lot of those communities. Often we promised a lot and didn't deliver, but also we took a lot of votes for granted. When we're talking about things like black voters, increasingly we're seeing black voters saying we feel like Labour takes us for granted, and if we continue down this path, we're really screwed. Like, we are not going to get back into government. So how we address that and how we politicise the working classes, I really do think it comes back to our trade union movements. This is the kind of bedrock of what Labour is supposed to be, and we so focus on joining Labour and then joining trade union. Like, I imagine most people here, from my experience, most people join Labour and then join a trade union that are active within Labour. So really, it should be the other way around. It should be you go to work, or you go to your university, or wherever you are, you experience the struggle, you maybe on low pay, you're struggling to pay your bills, your landlord is exploiting you, and you then join a trade union and work with others to fight back against this thing. And that's how you get politicised, because you don't get politicised by these kind of abstract issues that you kind of don't have any interaction with. You get politicised by the things that make you angry, the things that you struggle with every single day. And so from my experience, like, my family weren't political. I got my mum to join a trade union. She had no idea what they were. And the reason that happened was because I got angry about the injustices that I was seeing. I saw her get made redundant. I went looking for answers. And I found them in Labour Party and in the trade union movements. In my own workplace, there was a situation where we were facing redundancies, and at the same time as the redundancies, the senior management were awarding themselves a pay rise, and people in my workplace kind of considered themselves, they do all right, we're a living wage employer, they're fine. But when they saw this injustice, they were like, hang on a minute, like, what's going on? How do we fight back against this? And so it was for people like me to be the one there saying, there's a way we can fight back against this that doesn't risk your employment. We work together, and you join a trade union, and that's exactly what we did, and we fought back. And so we managed to increase our trade union membership in my workplace by 10%, not 10%, times 10, sorry, 10%, that would be too low. So it's those struggles that we need to do to re-politicise the working class, and obviously making sure that we have the solutions to the problems that they face. Saying that we're slightly less worse than the Tories, not going to cut it. People don't care for that. We need to make the case strongly for a different kind of society.
Brilliant. Do either Kathleen or Ellie want to go next? And I know Isella has a question for once you've all done.
Yeah, you go, Kathleen.
And then Owen.
And yeah, so I actually think that the Conservatives have not necessarily the best platform or the best manifestos or the best leader, but they have a group of people who consistently vote for them. And I think that's, and it's and also I think it's also combined with like a kind of electorate and a political system that's first past the post, and that doesn't necessarily help. It doesn't necessarily help the Labour base, but that's a story for another time. What I would say is that I think is really interesting is that I actually, during the 2017 and 2019 general elections, I worked with a group called Rise Up. And Rise Up, basically, their job, and what we kind of did as a movement, was we went to like the unpoliticized, but what I basically mean is like underrepresented groups, and one of which I include in that is the homeless. So whether it was like getting them to vote, like how do we get them to vote, was like this big question that we had to kind of answer ourselves when the Snap General was called. So the way in which we did it, and this is just one example for the question that Niall raised, was so we worked with a company called Lush. I don't know if you've heard of it, but every single Lush store was converted into a kind of a Rise Up centre. And the point of that was you can go in and you can kind of hand them your details, and there'd be one person in every single store that would sign you up and register you to vote. And they did that for free. Like we just did it in partnership with them. And then we reached out to like several local kind of group leaders, whether that was we had groups that went into nightclubs. This is 100% true. I did this. They went to nightclubs and got people to vote because we gave them like stickers and badges, which drunk people love. We went to like places that were homeless. We went to migrant shelters. We went to anywhere where you can find people that don't vote or that traditionally haven't voted. And we worked directly with them to get them to vote. And Lush were very lucky in that they partnered with us in a nationwide to do it for free, and they were very lucky to do so. But we actually reached out to several other brands who, if given more time, probably would have helped us. So I think so that's kind of my one story of like how you can get young people to vote on a mass scale. And that was something that, like, you know, relevant to my work in Labour, I will always be proud to get young people to vote, or to get homeless people to vote, or get underrepresented people to vote, because I think that's just so, it's one of your duties as a young person, or your duty as a citizen, is to vote. What I think is really interesting, and I think what I would really love Keir Starmer to have a look at, is this idea that nothing is unwinnable and nothing is unlosable, and therefore every single vote counts. And we've got, you know, obviously the elections are going to be 2021, but we've got 4 or 5 years now to sit back and say, okay, we've taken so many groups for granted. We've taken young people for granted, I think personally, for way too long, but that's a story for another day. We've taken these groups for granted for so long, and we have basically assumed that they'll turn up to the ballot box because we say, drop our hat, off you go. Like, it's not going to work like that. We're never going to win again if we have that attitude. We're not going to win again if we are Tory light, like we were in 15. I think that was a lesson we kind of learnt once and really shouldn't be up for learning again. So I think if you can have like a radical vision combined with this of like how to make people's lives better, but like not necessarily for everyone, but like an individualized offer to the electorate, which is like, you know, you sitting in Weston-super-Mare, you sitting in Norwich, you sitting in Glasgow, you sitting in Northern Ireland, how we can make your life better. I think we'll do really well. I think combined with this idea that we've got 4 or 5 years to reel back with every single community. So like even in Tory heartlands, which I don't think, like Tory heartlands now, but in 3 or 4 years, I don't think they should be Tory heartlands, because I think we've got time to go in and to make those connections on a door by door basis. And I think if we've learnt nothing, like in the past couple of years, you know, Boris Johnson is totally defeatable if we have those connections within our communities and we put the time in and we create the relationship now and we watch it grow and grow and grow and we consistently provide value to everyone. I think that we would be able to do it. I think that there are a whole host of Tory councils and new Tory MPs that are well up for grabs next year and are well up for grabs in 4 years' time. And the way to do that is to not take anyone for granted, and it's to actually listen to our community. So I hope kind of what can Keir do, I think it's like, get out of Westminster, open your eyes, start reconnecting. And whether that's like just with people on the whole, or whether that's having like recruitment, you know, people like community organisers whose job it is to be there for the long term, that they are embedded in those communities, and their job is to connect with the community, see what's happening, see on the ground what the political weather is, and then act on behalf of those consistently. And if we do that, I think in a combination with a consistent get out the vote effort. So when I worked with Rise Up, we did kind of the 6 weeks before the general, kind of the 6 weeks in the general, and then kind of a little bit afterwards. And we kind of left by saying, this is a 4-year project that we did in like, you know, 12 or 13 weeks. And we didn't have enough funding and there wasn't enough for us. So I think that there's so, like, obviously I know 2019 and like the 13th of December was a terrible day for everyone, but I really take a lot of hope, and I really take a lot of things that young people are going to be the ones that do this, which is why I think like who's the next chair of Young Labour and what the next national committee is like actually so important. So it's a combination of reconnecting with communities, not understanding that everything is winnable and everything is losable and every vote counts wherever you go, and understanding that there are huge groups of society which don't naturally vote, and we've got to tap into their networks to decide how they can do it.
Yeah, and I'll just go quickly. I just saw Jess's message that she has to dash. I think we amongst us must have so many like YL groups and obligations. Like I've got 1.5 hours. But yeah, I think it's just tapping into communities. I think, you know, I'm really fortunate coming from a working class community in Cardiff and seeing a working class community in Liverpool. You know, I see how important it is for collective action, especially among the working class and among classism. You know, it has to be a collective of a community, and it has to be a collective. You know, as Cathleen pointed out with, you know, her example of getting people signed up in Lush, like it's things like that like it's looking at community and looking at the aspects of community and going, right, how can we have sort of like this mass sign up to vote? I know that we did it in the 2019 general election, and we did it even better in the 2017 election, where we had like this mass call for people to join and sign up to vote. We saw it as, you know, first time voters came about in 2017. I think it was the most that we'd ever seen in terms of first time voters, and I think it was the same in 2019. You know, I think it's brilliant, and it just has to be this drive. It has to be this absolute drive for communities to get up and get active, and it's for Labour, and it's up to Labour to get into these communities and, you know, tell them the importance of voting, tell them the importance of government. I think, you know, especially when we've had 3 elections in 5 years, we're seeing it more and more of voter fatigue, and it's something that is really, really endemic, and it's something that's a problem, especially among the working classes, because, you know, how do we make it approachable to the working classes? How do we show that Westminster isn't so out of touch that it stops affecting their lives? Westminster affects everyone's lives. So yeah, it's up to Labour to get it out and to get the vote out, to get communities active, and to show communities just how important it is to vote.
Okay, thank you so much for that, and another great series of answers. I know we have got 2 questions here, so is it okay if we take both at the same time, both from Isella and from Owen, and then you both answer them just sort of quick fire style? Jess, you can go first if you have to shoot, and then Ellie, if you have a thing in half an hour as well. Is that okay with everybody? Thumbs up, yes? Cool, okay, that's ace. So Isella or Owen, do you both just want to ask your questions quickly?
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering what you thought Young Labour could best do to oppose the current like increasing toxicity of the debate around asylum seekers and migration, and how we can shift the leadership to maybe be a bit more aggressive on that.
Nice. And then my one was just like the right-wing press did a really good job of driving a wedge between workers and students, sort of saying Labour was the party of students, not workers in the last election. So I was wondering what all 3 of you would do as chair of Young Labour to actually show that a lot of the same struggles workers have intersect with that of students as well.
I'm going to have to be really brief on these, so I probably won't be able to say as much as I can on them, but I'm happy to DM both of you. I also really want to start all of my answers with an Owen, like, nice. The toxicity around asylum seekers and migration, I feel like we have played into this as a pie for too long, and even under Corbyn, like, I found that we often avoided it because we knew that it was going to be a tricky topic on a lot of areas, like maybe on the doorstep, or when facing like the Tories when they're trying to create this rhetoric which the media kind of peddle. So I think that we need to start addressing it head on. We need to call it out where we see it. We also need we need to be putting our energies into an alternative press as well. While we have the system that we currently have, where the mainstream media, literally all of them, peddle this narrative, this anti-migrant and particularly anti-refugee narrative, we aren't getting our side of the story, we aren't getting their side of the story, we aren't combating these I guess, policies that are being peddled, which are creating a hostile environment, and things that we've heard Priti Patel coming out with over the last few weeks. I've seen literally no response from the Labour leadership on this. So really clear policies to combat it. I think we need to train up members on the doorstep who have to have these conversations, because often what I would see I don't know if any of you have been door knocking before, I think some of you have, if people came up with, oh, you know, well, I don't want to vote for Labour because of insert kind of broadly racist sentence here, often we just didn't know how to deal with it. And a lot of these people aren't really sure what they're talking about. They've seen this headline in some, I don't know, maybe in the Sun, and then they repeat it. And often we aren't equipped as volunteers in the Labour Party to address it. And so I think it would be really good for us to develop a way of supporting activists to combat all of these awful narratives. The other question around, sorry, Anne, I've forgotten what your question was. Right-wing press and workers and students?
Yeah, it's sort of pitting students and workers against each other quite successfully.
Yeah, but this is what they do, isn't it? It's the same kind of divide and rule tactics that we see with migrants as well. I think that the way that we combat a lot of this is activity in communities. So if we have those conversations with people around us, if we get active in different things that are going on. Oh, and I know that you're active in the holiday hunger, North Against Holiday Hunger work. You're probably meeting a lot of people who actually may hold a lot of the anti-migrant views or anti-young people views. And so you're the kind of people that are best placed to challenge these kinds of views, because you're someone that they trust, you're supporting them, you're a regular face, you're a stability in their life. And you're somebody that they will be able to, eventually trust and talk to about these issues. So embedding ourselves in the community is really essential to tackling kind of big powers that are looking to exploit and divide us. And obviously, like the wider issue of blaming young people, old school Tory tactics. Unfortunately, it usually works, but it's very short term, and I think we have to remember that. So often we see, them blaming care workers, things in the COVID crisis. They sort of jump from people to blame. Students is obviously part of that too. So we need to make sure that we're ready for it, because we're often kind of playing the defensive, but we need to be really bold in challenging it. Every time they come at a group of people, we need to readdress it and say, actually, who holds the power and who do we need to be holding accountable? I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to go, but thank you so much for having me. And it's been a pleasure talking with you all.
Thank you so much for coming, Jess. Thanks for sorry for sort of running into your other event. But hey, there you go. Ellie, do you want to go next, or Kathleen?
Yeah, I'm loving these pets. Like, we've seen it. Got your dog. I love the LGBT collar on him.
Yeah.
Like,
Snoopy's a gay comrade. He knows the struggle.
Good.
But on the issue of asylum seekers first, Jess answered it bang on, and all I can do is reiterate what she said. We need to ensure that asylum seekers are at the front of our movement and the front of being protected by our movement. For so long they've been scapegoated, as Jess said, under Corbyn, they were ignored, they weren't taught, it wasn't spoken about, the issues weren't spoken about, and we need to ensure that all marginalised groups, and especially those seeking a better life and a safe life in Britain, are given that. And we need to do everything that we can in the Labour Party to ensure that they are given a safe life away from, what they've seen, even what they're seeing in Calais and the jungle. It's really appalling, and it's something that it's a stain on our society. It's a stain on the European Union that there is such a thing. We need to ensure that wherever possible, that asylum seekers are protected, especially by the government. What Priti Patel has done and what she continues to do as Home Secretary is nothing short of appalling. It is awful. I was sorry to see that the Labour Party haven't condemned a lot of what Priti Patel has said, especially over the last few weeks. And I really hope that they do, because it is so important, especially as the opposition, to show that we are different from the government, that we stand with asylum seekers, we stand with refugees, we stand to ensure that everybody who comes to Britain is given the best life possible. And then on your question, Owen, on sort of that sort of blame game that the Tories do, they always do this divide and conquer. We saw it in COVID with care workers, and we're seeing it again. We're seeing it again with students. You know, it's on us. I know the Tories did a campaign in August, "Don't bring COVID home to Granny," or something like that, and it was just absolutely terrible. And I've heard from friends in government that what the message is going to be come Christmas is "Don't bring home COVID for Christmas" for students. And it's this total scapegoat of going, who can we blame next? Oh, I know, let's blame students because we've made them voiceless. And our challenge and our absolute goal should always be to ensure that we as students have that voice. We speak up, we speak out against this government. Like I said earlier, you know, this government has now been in power for 10 years. They've made our life hell on earth. They've made it expensive to be a student. They've made it out of reach for working class communities. They have made it unaffordable to be a student. And the reality is that going back to, you know, that student workers and sort of like the divide that they're putting towards it, most students are workers. I have a part-time job. Most students have a part-time job because they simply cannot afford it, and they can't afford to be a student. And so, yeah, it's standing up and it's saying, no, you can't scapegoat us. You can't, you know, bring down the working classes. You can't bring down the workers, when in reality, the hardest hit is because, well, we are hit hard because of your government. This is because of your government and your policies, and we need to speak out against it.
Right, I think it just leaves me as the last one. I will try and run through these answers. So I actually work for a young women's migrants' rights charity. So I see this on a day-to-day basis. So I can't really, I try and be apolitical in that role, despite the fact that I absolutely hate the Tories. It's actually quite a challenge. But what I basically see is that the young women that come in to our organisation are like hugely talented and are probably bilingual, probably have an understanding of things that I would never understand, are probably qualified in something or another, like have an ability to like do incredible things that I couldn't even dream of doing, and have gone through like exceptionally horrible experiences to get here. And then when they get here are treated like dirt, essentially, even by their own communities, by the government, by their local councils, and have nowhere else to turn. And on a day-to-day basis, I speak to people that like these young women are having a really tough time, and, you know, mental break, like it's very, very sad. I think that the language about migrants has been allowed to grow for so long, and I kind of think about the swarm of migrants thing that David Cameron said back in 2014, I think, and this idea that migrant women especially aren't human and have nothing to give to society, when actually every single, like all the papers that have been written, all the academia that's been done behind immigration has shown that if regulated properly, immigration is good for our society, it's good for our NHS, it is good for our economy, it's good for our society, it is good for us to reach out to our neighbours and friends and to take in people that are asylum seekers or have had a very hard time and have come to this country in search of a better life. So you have to be really clear about whose side you stand on, and you also have to be really clear about who you're welcoming in. This idea that they're aliens is completely ridiculous. And if you sat down and spoke to one of them, your heart would go out to them, but also you would be quite worried about I, on a daily basis, I'm worried about my lack of qualifications and compared to what these migrant women have got, to be quite honest, who are a little bit older than me, have gone through a hell of a lot more than I have, but have so much more to show for it, and have these like huge ideas and are exceptionally creative and have an ability to solve problems and connect with communities that I couldn't even dream to do. So, you know, I will always be on the side of the oppressed, but we have to, I think we allowed the language to go on for too long. We allowed the negative language to go on for too long. And we are beginning, we are beginning to try to change that. I try and have meetings with like the Home Office every 2 or 3 months to have like a chat with them, and like they don't even answer my emails. So we're like in a situation where I've asked government ministers, I've asked local council, conservative local council leaders, I've asked ministers, I've asked everybody who can come and speak to us and come and see the work that we do. We are a charity, we do great work. Like, you know, our workers work so hard. We have free legal advice so that people can come and basically get legal advice. And one of the things that I kind of am working on at the minute is is an amendment to the domestic violence bill. So as it currently stands, if you're a young woman or a young man that comes into the UK and your status is unsettled, you actually can't ring the police to report a crime, or you shouldn't, or you're told not to, because they will then, with your crime, check out your status, and if you are unsettled, or there might be an issue with your application or your asylum seeker that hasn't been processed, they will remove you, they will deport you from the country after they finish solving like your crime, whatever that is. So that means that migrant women know that, especially, so they don't report crimes, and then other people who know that they're migrant women, know that basically they can come and steal everything, they can come and like assault them in the street, the whole enchilada, because the police don't care, because there's this understanding in the Home Office that your crime and crime that has happened to you, you're the victim of a crime, don't really care. So I've asked the Home Office continually, I'm working with other migrants charities on this at the minute, to basically establish a campaign to say, like, please include an amendment to the Domestic Violence Act to include that migrant women or that young migrants or young immigrants can basically report crime anonymously, and that their status isn't called into question when that crime is being investigated. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the story. I wish you'd asked that question earlier, because I've got like a whole other thing to say on it that I can literally read from days and days and about, but I'm not going to go into that. So this concept of like the media, the mainstream media, I think you have to be exceptionally, I think you've got to be exceptionally aggressive from day one about how you deal with the media. And there are message discipline and our lines and our values that have to stay consistent throughout Keir's premiership. I think it's very clear, like, I don't really know why Keir's done anything with the Sun. I wouldn't do that. I don't really know why Keir's done anything with the Murdoch media. I'm not too sure. Like, they're never going to give us a fair hearing. So why aren't we aggressive? I don't know. But I'd kind of love to say a little bit more, like, about the fact that the mainstream media was fantastic. It was like, the main source of media 50 years ago, and in the next 50 years might not be, because there's this phone that's basically attached to everyone's hand, and with it you have an ability to change the world. And I think actually our things that we said earlier, the BLM movement, the climate crisis movement, we've seen the progression of movements because we all have phones. So, and I think that's actually incredible. So I would say, in the last election, for example, we were outspent on Facebook and on social media, but I think in the next election we've got to outspend the Tories. And whether that's like great content, whether that's creating like viral content that's with our communities, that's built with our communities, whether that's like pushing Facebook, whether that's understanding our algorithms better, understanding that I think it's 2 in 3 people in the UK currently have Facebook. We should reach every single one of them, and that's more popular than our mainstream media. I think that is really, really, I would love to see a little bit more done on that. And I think it's a whole thing, it's another thing for a whole other day. I think especially in COVID, there seems to be like a wheel in number 10, and they just like swing it. And then like, it's like, who do we blame this week? And it's like students, old people, young people, eat out to help. And it's like, and every week Boris, like on a Monday, just like swings it. And Boris and Dominic obviously sit in number 10, because every week it seems to be like somebody else's fault that this is happening. And I think you'd have to be, as I said in my earlier answer, consistent about attacking the government. So I really like what Angela Rayner said on GMB 2 days ago, this idea that like government ministers aren't going onto any kind of mainstream media to explain their actions because they aren't really explainable, and you'd have a bit of a nightmare. But what we can do is we can say, well, they're not going to come and speak to you, but Keir Starmer, Angela, Annalise are fantastic, like good people in our shadow cabinet who are solid media performance, should be on national media every single day, getting out the message that there is a better government, there is a government in waiting, and it is called the Labour movement, and we can do this better. And we've seen that with compassion and with our values, that this crisis wouldn't have been as bad, and we could have solved, and we could be providing solutions, and we could be caring for people a lot more. I also think it's really interesting how, like, the demise of local media, which is what I think is really, really interesting, because I think if we had more local media, or we had a concept of like local news, if we were able to bring that back, and I don't really know if the Labour movement could do that, but I think a revival of local press would be of like local stories of local people, like those local community organisers making a difference, your PPC making a difference, your local councillor, your Labour people who are in your communities consistently making change, and then giving them a platform to speak in like a local media setting, or that's like strong social media, or having connections with that kind of, with your ground, with your base, and who you hope to support you. I think that's the best way to overcome what is like a lot of noise and a lot of narrative. I also feel that this government is like, so indefensible that I actually don't think Boris Johnson will last the 4 years. So I think we've got to be kind of cautious that this is the guy right now, but there's another one coming in a couple of years. Well, you say that's good, but like I think Rishi's the next one. So I think he's gonna, so we've got to equal, like one of them's incompetent and the other one's clever and incompetent, to be quite honest with you. So I'd be interested to see like how we can switch and how we can basically say that it's not Boris Johnson that's the problem, it's Boris Johnson and his government, and we've got to get rid of all of them, and we've got to have a general election as soon as possible. I'd also love to see like a little bit of a revival in kind of the Labour movement with this idea that we can start winning again. I think like for so long we like not expect to lose, but like we don't understand, like there's this understanding that we can't challenge the Conservative government consistently, and I think actually we can. Like I think I think everything that we've seen the past couple of years, especially from young people, shows that we can consistently challenge the Conservative government, and that's in a big way like why I'm running for chair, like in a really kind of huge clouds and dirt way, like to give people the voice to challenge the government and to provide an alternative government, which is what I think Labour could be. And I think Labour should be the next government in waiting, and we have to go into every single meeting with that in mind. Also, I volunteer with Magic Breakfast, so I know a little bit about the holiday hunger campaigns. It costs 43p to feed a child breakfast in the morning, and the Conservative government can't do that because it's too expensive, but alas, seem to be earning a huge amount of money in deals off, Jacob Rees-Mogg seems to be absolutely raining the money in at the minute off good things that he's made out of Brexit, whereas young people suffer. And then obviously we're seeing children not being able to eat when they're like starving during the holiday. And then when they come into school, there's like this paper that I read the other day, which is like, if a child has a breakfast, a consistent breakfast every morning, which is like 43p, I think is like the average one, you can actually see a correlation between better exam results and kids having breakfast. So you can actually see a result between successful young people and breakfast. And the Conservatives have seen that because the paper has been presented to government and they've decided not to care. And if that isn't an indication of how the government thinks about young people, I don't know what is.
Massively, thank you so much for that. Sorry that it's gone on so incredibly long, but I mean, it's glad that I'm glad that we've had so much engagement and that you've all had so much to say. Thank you to both of you for coming, and of course for Jess for coming, even though she had to leave early. I have actually recorded this, so I'm going to be able to email it to any members who couldn't make it, because we have a lot of interest, but obviously it's a difficult time. A lot of people have got, even though you have sort of, so in some ways you have so much time at the moment, you also seem to have none at the same time. So we're going to be emailing it out so that more people can see it. But yeah, thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you to our wonderful members for coming, as usual. Don't know how I managed to do that. Didn't use the laptop, but okay. But yeah, thank you for everyone for coming. And yeah, I'll let you all go and have your dinners now. Enjoy your pizza.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.